A patient of mine landed back in my hospital at 2 in the morning, so dehydrated her kidneys had started to shut down. She hadn't stopped eating out of willpower. She stopped eating because nobody told her what was normal on this medication and what wasn't. So when the nausea hit, she panicked. She stopped drinking fluids as well and ended up on my inpatient service instead of at her daughter's graduation. That case has stuck with me for years because almost none of it needed to happen. If you're on semaglutide, whether you know it as Ozempic or Wegovy, or you're considering starting it, this video is the one I wish every one of my patients watched before they ever picked up that pen. I'm going to walk you through exactly why these side effects happen and the specific evidence-based strategies that actually reduce them, not internet folklore, actual clinical data, and 2 decades of watching this play out on the hospital floor. Before I go further, the obligatory but genuinely important part. I'm a physician, but not your specific physician, and nothing in this video is personalized medical advice for you specifically. If something feels off while you're taking this medication, the first call you have to make is to the doctor who prescribed it. What I'm giving you here is a general evidence-based framework. What your doctor gives you is a plan that's built around your own personal labs, your radiology results, your personal medical history, and your other medications that you may be on that may be interacting, and your body. You need both. Quick recap, because the branding around this drug confuses almost everyone. Semaglutide is the active medication. At 1 milligram a week, it's marketed for diabetes under the name Ozempic. At the higher dose of 2.4 milligrams a week, that same molecule is marketed for weight loss under the name Wegovy or Wegovy. Same drug, different dose, different name on the box. For the rest of this video, when I say semaglutide, I mean both. The side effects patients bring up most often with this class of medication all trace back to the gut. Nausea, diarrhea, constipation, bloating, and excess gas. Also cramping or abdominal discomfort. In the pivotal trial that got Wegovy approved, 44% of patients on the drug reported nausea compared to 17% on placebo. 32% reported diarrhea compared to 16% on placebo. That's published in the New England Journal of Medicine, and it's not a rumor. Here's the part almost nobody explains to patients. Why does this happen at all? Semaglutide works partly by slowing down how fast food leaves your stomach. That's actually the mechanism behind the appetite suppression. Food sits in your stomach longer, so you feel full sooner and longer. But that same mechanism means if you eat the way you used to eat before starting this medication, there's simply nowhere for that food to go. It actually backs up, and your brain's nausea center, which this drug also acts on directly, gets the message loud and clear. Once you understand that one mechanism, almost every tip in this video makes intuitive sense. There isn't a list of arbitrary rules. It's a list of ways to work with how the drug actually functions in your body instead of against it. Tip number 1, cut your portions down and then cut them again. Nothing else on this list moves the needle as much as this one change, and it won't cost you a dime or require a prescription. Just shrink what's on your plate. The majority of patients tell me they're getting through roughly 50% less food per sitting than what they were before they started this medication. Not because they were lectured about willpower, but it's because their bodies made the decision for them, sometimes forcefully, once the old serving sizes stop fitting. So, what should you do? Eat slowly. Put the fork down between bites and stop the moment you feel satisfied, not the moment your plate is empty. That second one is the most people struggle with because a lot of us were raised to clean our plates, and I was one of them. But on this medication, eating past the point of fullness is exactly what turns a normal, manageable side effect into a miserable night. Think about the scene that plays in half of the family sitcoms around the holidays. Someone at the table keeps eating well past comfortable because the food is good and the plate is still there. And 20 minutes later, they're miserable on the couch. That's the exact physiology happening here but just amplified because your stomach is emptying at a fraction of its normal speed. I had a patient come through onto my hospitalist service, and he was in his 50s and otherwise a healthy man who ended up with severe vomiting and a trip to the ER after eating a full restaurant portion of steak and fries 3 days after his first Ozempic injection. He wasn't reckless. He simply didn't know his stomach could no longer handle what it handled the week before. We adjusted nothing about his medication. We just talked about portions. And he never had that problem again. Tip number 2, change the shape of your eating day, not just the amount. Most of my patients also do better restructuring when they eat, not just how much. Eating in smaller portions, spaced more often across the day, tends to produce fewer symptoms than the classic American pattern of a light breakfast and a rush lunch and a large dinner. If most of your calories land in one sitting at 7 at night, you're asking a stomach that's already emptying slowly to process a large load right before you lie down. And that's a setup for nausea and reflux. But here's the part people get backwards. They assume nausea on this medication only comes from eating too much. Just as often, it comes from waiting too long between meals. If you go 5 or 6 hours with nothing in your stomach and your blood sugar is drifting down, you could feel just as nauseated and lightheaded as you would from overeating. So I tell every patient the same thing. Keep something light and protein rich within arm's reach at all times. You can have almonds or a piece of fruit or a hard-boiled egg. Something you can eat the moment you start to feel that early wave of queasiness before it becomes a full afternoon lost to the couch. Tip number 3, know which foods are stacking the odds against you. Not all calories cost you the same amount of comfort on this medication. High-fat foods slow gastric emptying even further on top of what the drug is already doing, which is exactly the combination you don't want. Very high-sugar foods do something similar. They tend to spike and crash your blood sugar, which compounds nausea. Gas-producing foods deserve their own mention because bloating on top of delayed stomach emptying is a genuinely uncomfortable combination. If you have issues with beans or broccoli or other cruciferous vegetables or carbonated drinks or artificial sweeteners, which a lot of patients switch to thinking they're doing themselves a favor, instead they end up bloated and gassy for the rest of the day. None of these foods are bad for you in general. They're just poor choices for the week you're adjusting to a new dose, especially if you're sensitive to some foods. This is also where I bring in something from my own life. I've spent years tracking my own body composition, my own DEXA scans, and my own protein intake down to the gram, trying to answer one question for myself before I ever tried to answer it for a patient. How do you lose fat without losing the muscle that's keeping you strong and functional as you age? The answer on this medication is the same answer I use with my own nutrition. Prioritizing protein and vegetables you tolerate well over processed food, high-fat food, and high-sugar convenience food. Not because it's trendy, but because on a drug that's already suppressing your appetite, every bite needs to count nutritionally. You genuinely don't have calories to waste on food that isn't serving you right. Tip number 4, treat water like part of your treatment plan, not an afterthought. Constipation is one of the most under-discussed side effects of this medication, and hydration is your single best defense against it. When your gut is moving more slowly overall, and you're also eating less volume of food, which usually means less fiber and less fluid coming in through food itself, then constipation compounds fast. I've admitted patients to the hospital with severe constipation that progressed to a bowel obstruction, which required intervention, which was entirely preventable with adequate hydration and a fiber source from the very first week of treatment. Make water a deliberate part of your day, not something you remember when you're already thirsty. If plain water is hard to get down in volume, a fiber supplement or naturally high fiber foods you tolerate well can help carry the load. This is not a dramatic intervention. It is one of the cheapest, easiest things you will do all week, and it prevents one of the most miserable and most avoidable complications of this medication. Tip number 5, time your injection around your life. not the other way around. If your work week runs Monday to Friday, a recommendation I often give is giving yourself the shot late Friday just as you're settling in for sleep. And here's the reasoning behind this. Whatever queasiness or low energy this medication is going to cause you, it typically peaks in the roughly 48 hours that follow a dose. Push that window onto a Saturday and Sunday when you're not the one who has to be sharp in a meeting or driving carpool, and the whole experience becomes dramatically more bearable. This isn't a clinical requirement, obviously, but it's a practical one. Practical matters when you're trying to stay on a medication long enough for it to actually work. Tip number 6, where you inject may matter. Some patients tell me that switching from the abdomen to the thigh noticeably calms down their nausea and GI upset. So here's my actual recommendation. If your current site is treating you fine, leave it alone. If injecting in the abdomen is giving you appetite control you're happy with, stay there. But if the nausea from the abdominal injections has become genuinely disruptive, not just mildly annoying, moving to the thigh or upper arm is reasonable. You may give up a bit of appetite suppression in exchange for a version of this medication you can actually stay on long enough to benefit from. Tip number 7, if the climb is too steep, your doctor can slow it down. This medication is dosed on a titration schedule for a reason. You start low and the dose increases in steps, typically every 4 weeks or longer, specifically to give your gastrointestinal system time to adapt before the next increase. If you're struggling on a given dose, tell your doctor before your next scheduled dose increase, not after you've already suffered through it. There is real flexibility here that most patients don't realize exists. Your physician can hold you at your current dose longer than the standard schedule. In some cases, smaller, more gradual dose increases can be arranged. This is exactly the kind of adjustment described in the clinical literature on managing these side effects. And it is a completely normal, expected conversation to have with your prescriber. You are not failing the medication by needing a slower ramp. The medication is supposed to bend to you, not the other way around. So let's talk about the timeline and what to actually expect. If you remember one statistic from this entire video, make it this one. In that same pivotal trial mentioned earlier, only about 4.5% of patients on semaglutide discontinued the medication, specifically because of gastrointestinal side effects. Compare that to the 44% who experienced nausea at some point. That gap matters. It tells you that for the overwhelming majority of people, these symptoms are real, but they're also survivable and temporary, and not a reason to give up. For most patients, the worst of it clusters around the first few weeks of starting the medication or the first week or two after each dose increase. By the 1 to 2 mark, as your body adjusts, the majority of patients report these symptoms fade substantially or resolve altogether. Now, that doesn't mean grit your teeth through anything and everything. It means there is a light at the end of this particular tunnel, and knowing that in advance changes how you experience the process. Let's talk about when this stops being a side effect and becomes an emergency. I need to say this clearly because I've treated the patients who waited too long. Call your doctor immediately or go to an emergency room if you cannot keep any fluids down for more than a day, if you have severe abdominal pain that doesn't let up, or if you notice signs of significant dehydration like a racing heart, dizziness when you stand, or dramatically decreased urination, or if you have any symptoms that feel like they're rapidly getting worse rather than better. If you're diabetic and on insulin or other diabetes medications in addition to semaglutide, this matters even more. Severe nausea that stops you from eating normally can throw your blood sugar management into a dangerous pattern. This isn't meant to scare you off the medication. It's meant to make sure you use it the way it was designed to be used, with medical oversight, not in isolation. There's been a lot of noise around these medications, some of it from public figures, loud voices in Washington, some of it from celebrities who've gone on television and admitted they were on it without fully understanding what they had been prescribed. I'm not here to talk about any of that debate for you. What I will tell you, as someone who has prescribed this class of medication and also treated the complication when it's used carelessly, is that the actual clinical evidence sits calmly in the middle of all that noise. This is a legitimately effective tool. It also deserves to be used with real information, not vibes or internet rumors, and not shame in either direction. Whether that's shame for needing help losing weight or shame for needing help staying on the medication comfortably. That's the entire purpose of this channel. I didn't spend 2 decades in the medical field and become board certified in obesity medicine to land people a prescription and walk away. I got certified in personal training and nutrition on top of my medical training because I got tired of watching the gap between what doctors tell patients and what patients actually need to know to succeed. You deserve the whole picture. You deserve evidence, mechanism, and a plan, not just a pen and pamphlet. If this video helped you make sense of what's happening in your own body, there's a lot more waiting for you at drmohammedpaika.com. If you want the deep, structured version of everything I teach to GLP-1 patients, the nutrition targets, the muscle preservation protocol, the exercise programming built specifically for people on this medication, that's my GLP-1 Masterclass, and it's on the site. If you sign up for my newsletter, you'll get my GLP-1 diet cookbook for free, built specifically around the food strategy I walked you through in this video. If you want to understand how I think about this entire field from the science to the personal side of it, I wrote the weight equation to lay out how I think about obesity medicine. And I wrote my own story, which I call the physician's physique, to show you my personal side of that journey, including my own body composition experiments and transformation, and what I've learned from it. And if you want to be part of a community of people doing this alongside you, join my metabolic health community on School. The link to all of it is in the description below. You started this medication to get healthier. My goal is to make sure the side effects don't talk you out of finishing what you started. Stay safe, stay happy, and good luck on your journey. This is Dr. Paika. I'll see you in the next video.